This presentation addresses the first two steps in the instructional design process presented in this course. This focuses on assessing the instructional needs in step 1, which leads to identifying an instructional goal, analyzing the goal to determine the goal steps, and then also analyzing the content and the concepts to be facilitated. And as I previously presented, this is the very first step in the instructional design process. And this is where, in terms of analysis, you analyze the overall need. What does your client or what do you as an educator need regarding, or what do your students need? What do they need to be able to do in order to successfully accomplish something that you have identified as important? You also analyze the content. Content is super important because it provides a concrete focus and structure to learning important skills. You also analyze a goal or goals once you begin to formulate them, and you analyze them to determine, well, what needs to be learned in order to accomplish those goals. And then you also analyze the learning environment, that is, what resources are available, how many students are there, or who are the learners, what's their profile, anything that would be important in terms of making subsequent decisions about an effective learning environment needs to go into the initial analysis and then the subsequent one. In this particular course, you were provided with a case in which a teacher enlisted your help in order to develop a learning experience that is designed to help her students acquire some really, really important skills. Upon further discussion with the teacher, some of the things that contribute to what skills should be learned have to do with the teacher's respect for and her priority of facilitating 21st century skills, in particular the critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity skills, the 4 C's in that model. So she's interested in continuing to facilitate those skills, as any good teacher would want to focus on, I tell you. If you're an educator now and that's something that you don't focus on and facilitate, then you are really doing a disservice to yourself and your students. She's also interested in facilitating science process skills or science thinking skills, and those are actually very, very copacetic with the critical thinking skills. You know, it's funny, critical thinking is a pretty broad, nebulous term, and it's something that I know is bantered around a bit, and people talk about it, but what does it actually mean? What do critical thinking skills really mean, and what do they look like? Some people might take a look at Bloom's taxonomy and think, well, that would be at the higher end of Bloom's taxonomy. But that's just trading one abstraction for others that are organized in a pyramid shape. It's still abstract. But I think that helping students learn the process of thinking like a scientist is a very clear roadmap for facilitating critical thinking skills, because that is precisely what scientists do, and it's one of the greatest values of learning science is that very thing. I think it's much more concrete and much more effective at facilitating broad, transferable critical thinking skills than something like mathematics, which is more of a language that helps detail and describe how to make sense of certain things, but I'm not sold whatsoever on math's ability to create transferable problem-solving skill sets. Jury's still out on that, and I'm very skeptical of that. However, I'm a firm believer that science skills are very applicable. The idea of making good observations, organizing them, and then creating some kind of logical environment or test to determine whether or not a hypothesis might or might not be supported. All of that is inherently transferable to thinking more critically and more rationally, I think. Now, in addition to all of this, the teacher has some content which she is interested in facilitating associated with cells and with the difference between animal and plant cells. And that's good too. I mean, content is very important. And certainly cells, living things, animals and plants, those are all things that human beings tend to interact with regularly in many different ways. And so in terms of content, it's very important and very valuable. So you know that's you know after talking with the teacher that she has some needs, and that she thinks her students have needs associated with thinking like a scientist, critical thinking, and then some content skills. There you sit down and you begin the process of trying to formulate, well, what do you want your students to be able to do forever as a result of this learning experience, and what is its focus? What is its goal? What is the purpose of the dinner party? Going back to the intro video. That's what analysis part 1 is. In the next video, we're going to focus on once you have identified in general what the goal is. What do you want the students to be able to learn how to do forever? The next step is to try to figure out, okay, well, in what context, what context could be developed so that learning those things has meaning and has a purpose. And we'll talk about that in the next presentation.